Simon Schama, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you for having me.
How profound is this moment in historic terms, a decision by the White House that so clearly benefits Russia?
This is one of those days of massive historical importance, world historical importance. It is a day of horrible infamy. It feels like being around the day the Munich Agreement was signed between Neville Chamberlain and Hitler. It's world overturning, really. It could be something that signals a catastrophic endgame for the defence of the democracies. And this all sounds very histrionic, I know, and historians are usually, possibly not me, dry and crusty, sceptical and cool-tempered. This is not a day to be cool-tempered. This is not a day to have business as usual. Hey, news outlets everywhere, you know, 10 minutes of cyclone, OK, you should, but this is really monstrously destructive.
Explain why.
Well, because I think ever since, really, Franklin Roosevelt, in particular the United States, even when the United States had to wait for Pearl Harbor to actually join the war, the United States proclaimed itself to be the arsenal of democracy, and Lend-Lease, the provision of munitions materials to embattled Britain was incredibly important. And ever since then, you can signpost it, the Berlin airlift in 1948, Jack Kennedy's speech about the protection of freedom. The one thing that would not change between Democratic and Republican administrations, Ronald Reagan, as we sit here and speak, Sarah, is spinning in his tomb, is that they may not be on the same page as the Europeans, but the sense of America's moral integrity and decency in the world was committed to the defence of democracy against totalitarianism. That has been brushed aside today.
And yet you raise FDR, and that brings me obviously to the question that this vein of American isolationism is not new. It existed then. There were powerful political forces in the US who wanted to stop FDR helping Churchill at the outbreak of war.
But Lindbergh did not win the election. You know, the campaign that was premised on America First did not win the election.
But are these the same? Is this the same vein? Are these the same political forces, essentially, reborn?
They're not entirely dissimilar. Again, you know, one should be allergic to making cheap 1930s analogies. Even I am. Yeah,
I hope I wasn't.
Me too. But the sense in which actually you reward naked aggression with extortionate demands for capitulation is absolutely what Munich was about. And of course, one thing we know, this is not controversial between Republicans, Democrats, most of us lucky enough to live in the free world. When you do reward aggression, it guarantees another round of aggression. And we can tell today, tonight, you know, people in the Baltic states, in Poland, in Moldova and so on, I hope they won't be shaking in their shoes, but they will be in a sense of sense of desperate trouble and dismay.
Explain to us how what the Americans are saying, and to be clear, of course, it's, for the moment, it's a pause on funding to Ukraine, but let's assume that it goes ahead, even just the threat. How does Putin see this? How does it change? Does it change his level of ambition?
Putin probably is in pain from laughing so much, you know, really, actually. He could not have conceivably supposed that, in effect, he would have recruited something very close to an alliance, or at least American foreign policy would actually converge so deeply with his fundamental attempt to really force a Ukrainian capitulation. He couldn't remotely have thought that would happen, actually. And it seems to be that Ukrainian capitulation has been dropped into his hands without him having to spend any more blood or treasure. The pause thing is significant. Donald Trump, remember, has actually paused military help to Ukraine before in 2019. And guess what? The condition then was the Ukrainians supply dirt that would compromise Biden's political future. This is shocking. This is much more serious in that what Donald Trump says, if we're, that may or may not be rowing back, is that all military aid will be suspended until Zelenskyy is, quote, ready for peace. But this is the kind of Munich peace.
Are we seeing, in this case, is this transactional related to Ukraine and perhaps business interests in Russia? Because there's more and more detail coming out about Russia's ambitions if there's a change in the sanctions regime, for example. Right. Is this transactional on the part of Donald Trump, or are we seeing a more profound withdrawal of America into its own sphere and out of Europe and out of perhaps the Indo-Pacific?
It's undoubtedly transactional, but that doesn't actually exclude the possibility that there are deeper, darker, very potent forces which are profoundly isolationist and which think really the whole of American foreign policy should sort of stay clear of imbroglios. I mean, you know, Henry Cabot Lodge, the failure to ratify the Versailles Treaty, America's withdrawal from Europe again, you know, cast an immediate black cloud over the prospects for peace in Europe after the First World War. So it's not like this comes out of absolutely nowhere. And the success of the kind of, you know, Trumpian campaign really is to actually make the majority of those who are MAGA loyalists feel essentially that the Europeans have nothing to do with their fate or fortune, their prosperity, whatever, that this is sort of like some, you know, foreign distraction really, which is profoundly un-American. Whereas the peace and strength of the free world has depended on the defense of democracy being the most American thing there possibly could be. Think of all those lives lost on the beaches of Normandy in the war against Japan. It is so profoundly upsetting.
On that profound note, Simon Schama, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Pleasure, Sarah. Thank you.